Well, I hope you've had a chance to talk with your colleagues at the table and maybe discuss some things about practice and hopefully discuss the questions that are up on the wall. I will say this, that I know many of you are furiously writing down notes. Here's what happens with all of the slides. We will probably tomorrow or the next day email to everybody that signed that sheet out there a copy of the slides. We've been doing that, and I forgot to say that earlier. We will also be posting a combination of all the slides. Remember, we're doing 5 of these. The last one is next week in San Diego. So we will be posting those slides probably in a couple, 3 weeks after we clean them up and kind of organize them a little bit better. And then in addition to this, we are being filmed. And this, we're going to be posting this and editing and then posting it on our internet, or probably go onto YouTube and be connected through the internet. And it's a very interesting way that the filmmakers are putting this together. There'll be the slide and there'll be a picture of the speaker right next to it. So you'll be able to get a lot of the flavor of what's going on. So I thank them for doing a really good job. They did 7x7x7 for us before, and it worked out really, really well. So that kind of takes care of some housekeeping. The last piece of housekeeping is that when we're done here, we're going to take a break before we start the afternoon session. And that quadrant over in the corner is going to become the room that we're going to use. They're going to pull out the walls and close off that area that we're going to use for those folks that are new to the process and that really want to do an interactive discussion with our representatives from DSA, OPSC, and CDE. So when we're done here, I'm going to ask the people in the corner to get up and come and fill in the other tables so that you leave the table, don't move it, because some people will be sitting there, but so that they can move those walls and put the walls into place. And so we're going to take about a half hour right now and look at some of these questions. And I really urge you to be forthright with us, tell us the truth. The only way that we can change and grow is by listening carefully to what's going on with our clients. That doesn't mean that we'll always agree, but we do need to have a really intelligent discussion. So let's start with question number 1, which is, really interested in the plan review process. What can we do from a big picture systems process, what can we do to change or to improve the plan review process? We're already going to electronic plan review. That's underway. Help us, and we've been doing a lot of electronic plan check. If you've got ideas on that, we want to hear from it. And so I'm going to just point to a table arbitrarily and ask somebody to stand up and kind of tell us what you folks have been talking about. And if you've got other ideas and you're not at a table that I pointed to, please raise your hand, jump up, scream, wave, do anything you can to attract our attention. We want to go forward. So I'm going to look at the table right over there. Yes, your table, because I warned you that I was going to do it. I wanted them to be the guinea pigs. Somebody stand up or sit down, however you want to do it, and tell us what you think might be interesting ways for us to improve.
Sure. Nolan Linehan, DLR Group. One item I brought up.
We've got to make a statement here.
Yeah.
Yes, my firm eventually merged into DLR, but I had nothing to do with whatever he's saying here.
I am not paid to be here. So one thing I brought up was that's sort of a continual challenge on projects for us is the inconsistency of volume of comments from project to project based on the reviewer. Not necessarily even region to region. Within one region, a different reviewer might have, very few comments versus a whole lot of red on the sheet. We're talking high variability such that when it becomes challenging when we're work planning. Is it going to be 1 week of review for this size project, or is it going to be 4 weeks of review? And so my question to DSA was, is there a process, or do you guys monitor that, or what measures are you taking to ensure that the product coming out in terms of the review comments is consistent?
Well, I'm going to ask Dan to maybe help me on this one, but I would start by saying we do not have a number of comments that should be on a set of plans. On one hand, I would say if you're sending out a set of plans and they're really good, we're not going to mark them up just for the sake of marking them up.
Sure.
On the other hand, we have inconsistency, and we're really aware of that. Dan,
Yeah, the example I gave was, I've gone in for one DSA approved project with a DSA approved detail, and it gets, significant markups on, from another reviewer, the exact same detail. So that kind of, and I realize that each person's different.
Dan, we're going to get you a mic over here, but go ahead, why don't you start?
Just real quick. Yeah. I think, well, the process is when the plan reviewers finish a plan review, then the supervisor does a final review of the project. So they are looking at consistency between reviewers, and they're also looking at, are the plan review comments appropriate? Did they go too far? Did they not go far enough? So we do have a process in place where the supervisors do a final review. I don't think we're maybe ever get 100% identical comments between plan reviewers, but it should be fairly close. There shouldn't be big discrepancies. If you do see that, I'd urge you to bring it to the attention of the supervisor, with the structural fire access, and that you're seeing that. And as Chet mentioned before, we don't know if we can't fix a problem unless we know about it. So if you bring it up to the supervisor, you can tell them the specific projects, and they can look into it too. But they should be doing final reviews of the projects.
Yeah, that's a real tough one. I mean, just unless we had the two projects here that we can say, why was it marked up there? But I know from a personal fact that I was afraid to go up to the supervisor or anybody else because I did not want any retribution in terms of my projects. And I have to tell you, that's not the way we want to operate. You have to have the courage to be able to say to them, this is a problem, and then we have to have the courage to fix it if we can. So I apologize if you're getting the same details that one's approving and one's not approving. Something is wrong on our part. Tell us. We can't fix it. Were there any others from that table? Any other concerns? Okay, I'm going to go over and point to this table here in front. Sorry if I'm pointing. Sal, anything that came up here that might be helpful in terms of how we might change or?
No. I haven't heard anything that requires change unless they do. Answer is no.
So we've got a perfect set of working relationships. Okay, on one hand I love it, on the other hand I'm not sure I believe it. Somebody else, come on. How about this table over here? Did you talk about this? I mean, this is an important piece. We're working hard on plan review. There's a gentleman back there.
Do away with bin time.
We already did. It's gone. Were you listening? Seriously.
Okay, so then...
I'm serious. There is no such thing as bin time. You make an appointment for 6 weeks from today, and we will start reviewing your project 6 weeks from today.
And how would I know as a district that you've picked up my plans to be reviewed?
How would I'm sorry, you deliver the drawings to us.
Right, and you got them?
We've got them, and I believe it's posted. Am I correct, Dan?
Yeah, if you look at Tracker, if you go on the web version of Tracker under project tracking, you can look at when the plan reviews actually start.
And when we made the registration, is that on there yet?
I haven't looked. Hopefully it is there. It is on the internal version of Tracker. Shows the registration dates and shows the receive dates. I'm not sure about the web version of Tracker. I know it shows the plan review start dates. I'm not sure if it shows the registration date. I think it would show the receive date. I'd have to check.
Let me just say this. We are in the process of trying to upgrade our entire Tracker system. And so when he says he's not sure, we're not sure whether that's happened. But the reality is that if your architect says he delivered them, then he's got a date, and you can always pick up the phone and call the regional office and say, what's the status of our drawings? But it's 6 weeks as an appointment, and we start within 5 days of that period. And that's within, it's not 5 days. It could be 6 weeks to the day, but we need some flexibility because I got a plan reviewer who thinks he's going to finish on a particular date, but like everything else, it might move a couple days. So that's why we have that 5-day period in there. But there is no such thing as bin time. It does not exist. We have our own internal bin times in terms of how we're operating. Well, it's going to take a couple more days to move here. But in terms of the client, you've got it. You should get it within 5 days. There are some projects that have gone over, but I have to say this. I've been getting nothing but statements from people that we are meeting our commitments in terms of finishing the project on time, finishing what we've committed to in terms of the review. So if you have a specific project, why don't you talk with Dan, talk to Sal, talk to one of the folks here and find out what the date is. Okay, because we don't want you to believe that there's anything holding you up. Let's go back to the back corner there. Gentleman with a beard that you stood up in black, and I think it's black. You're, yeah, you, your table. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Not me necessarily.
Well, that's a discussion for your group. What can we do with plan review, with the plan review process that might help us? And maybe there's not a lot there, but there must be some things that we can do.
No pressure. I think the biggest thing that we're struggling with is projects being kicked at intake for an item that could probably be handled during the back check process or the review process. So the intake architect or intake structural engineer deeming something incomplete when in fact it's complete and could be flushed out between comments from the reviewer and the architect or structural engineer.
Okay, so, and that's a problem, a discussion we've had all along as to what is complete and what's incomplete. Dan, you want to address it? You want to help me on this one? I mean,
Okay. So I'd look at the DSA3 and make sure the project submittal checklist, all of the things that says these are required for a complete submittal, you have all of those in your package. So that's the first place to start. And then, in our office in Sacramento, the penalty is if it's incomplete, you've got to re-register for 6 weeks out. So we're giving people 2 working days. We're contacting the architects informally and saying, hey, these things are missing on any projects. Even if it's a bunch of stuff is missing, give them 2 working days to get it in. So if it's something easy to get in, you can get it in and you not lose your place in line there. I'd start with the DSA3. If you think it's not correct, and again, I'd appeal to the supervisor, start with the intake person, and then if you don't get it resolved there, talk to the supervisor too. But we do have to have complete submittals and in order for the checking to be efficiently done. So, but I start with the DSA3 and see if it's there.
I know you don't like that answer, but that's the answer. We do need a complete set of documents in order to start. It's not fair to others that are providing those complete sets to move that. Okay, we have a question over, or a point of view over here. Yes,
Rather
ma'am.
than be called on, we figured we would just volunteer. So it's kind of a two-part. Part of it is consistency within all 4 offices and within plan checkers and plan check consultants also. But what it really is if we bring it into the Sacramento office, we don't really want it to be sent out to a non-local office unless we're able to meet with that plan checker one-on-one, because we've had things like that happen where we've had to send the drawings down. They're comparing the drawings. They're not giving us the opportunity to talk to them one-on-one to help resolve those questions, which when we meet one-on-one with the plan checkers, we're actually able to go through comments really quickly.
Are you talking about a back check, or are you talking about?
On the back check.
Okay, so here's the approach that we're trying to make happen. First of all, we're offering a one-on-one, face-to-face at intake. So you theoretically can walk in and walk those drawings through. We're not talking about 3 days of, if it's a big project, obviously, we're not gonna be able to do it all in a short period of time. But if you wanna walk the job through and explain things, you can do that. Secondly, if we don't think of ourselves as an enterprise across the state, then we're not gonna be able to turn the projects out at the speed of light that we're trying to do. And the same thing using outside consultants. So with that in mind, how do we solve your problem, which is the inconsistency? Well, we've already said inconsistency between people within the office. It becomes more complicated when they're outside the office. We have said, and I said it earlier, that if you want to bring the team from, say, San Diego up to Sacramento to look at the job, assuming that it's worth the size of the job, we are willing to do that because we want you to be able to walk that job through with the person that reviewed it. Sometimes that's going to extend the time because that person, is not available on the particular day that you want it. That's what we're trying. The other part is that we do have the ability to do, and we're learning how to do it, to use the virtual system. That is to use, whether it's Zoom or any other FaceTime, any other system, to be able for you to have a video conference with that person and walk the drawings through. I know that's not what we're used to, and I know that you would prefer standing next to the person, but the reality is that it could push your job off from a time standpoint because our work is not even. Let me give you an example. Oakland was for the last 4 months or so booming with work. I'm talking about $500 million, $700 million, whatever, huge numbers of work coming in. All of us, and they're loaded, absolutely loaded. So we started spinning some work off to Sacramento, to San Diego, etc. This last month, for whatever reason, Oakland dropped down in terms of new work, and other offices, Los Angeles and San Diego, really pumped up with a lot of work. So we have to even it out, not for ourselves, but for you. Otherwise, we're just going to have a long period of time, a wait time. So I don't know if that helps. But if you have an idea of how to make it better, speak up, or later if you want to do it. Well, let her finish.
So in our instance, we weren't given the opportunity to have a plan checker come up. We had to send it down to them. So I understand when we have Zoom or Skype or whatever, we can at least talk to the person then and stuff like that, but we weren't even given that opportunity. So I think that's the frustration on our part is let us talk one-on-one, whether it's by Skype or having them come to the office.
Okay, we're trying to work our way through this. Remember, this is all new for us as well as it is for you. And we're trying to implement these things. So I apologize that you weren't given that opportunity, but it was no one's fault because they're just learning how to do it. Dan, did you want to add to that? Or?
No, I agree. Even if it's checked in a different office, you should be able to talk to that person. Just pick up the phone and call them and talk to them about the comments. Or we can do video conferences and stuff too. So again, if there's reluctance when you talk to the plan reviewer to do that, again, elevate it to a supervisor and we get that fixed.
But and back to this issue of bringing them up here. Obviously, I'm going to pick a number, for a $100,000 toilet remodel, none of us want to spend the kind of money to fly people around. But if you've got a major job and it's got a plan reviewer on there that you need to work with, and it's not possible for whatever reason, we're willing to bring them up, at least on the short term until we learn how to use all this magnificent technology that we've got. And do you have it? I don't know, do you have the cameras there available? We're just buying the cameras right now to do this. So work with us and let us know. I hope that is helpful anyways. There was somebody, I'm sorry. Yeah.
We just went through this as well, and I understand what you're saying. When we actually was outsourced to the San Diego office, very good plan checker, but he had some issues that were very hard to understand going back and forth between emails. We made a phone call and said, can we just get on the phone and have a conversation? And he did not want to do that, nor did he allow it. It took about a week to finally figure it out. Greg, literally in about a 5-minute conversation, told me, hey, he pulled me aside because we were doing access stuff, and he said, hey, what about this? And oh, light bulb went on. So sometimes a phone call will make a week's or 2 weeks worth of emails go away. And they did not want to do that. And that's, I think, the crux of the issue is there's better ways of solving things.
Thank you, and that's something that we really are trying to work with our staff to understand, that email is not the answer to the world's problems. Sometimes it is the problem itself. And that personal ability to talk things through is really helpful. So again, if somebody said to you, I'm not willing to talk to you, pick up the phone and call the supervisor and say, he said he wouldn't be willing to talk to me. I have some troubles with anybody in our office saying that they're not willing to talk to you. That's just not the way I know the regional managers feel that way. I know the supervisors feel that way. Our job is to make get buildings built, not to impede their work. So thank you for bringing that up, and we need to look at that one very carefully.
I have two questions in regards to what you could do to improve the plan review process. The first is to better explain the linkages between DSA and CGS. For instance, when does DSA require a report from CGS for regarding things like Note 48s? The IRs on this are not at all clear. I called the intake engineer in Oakland last week, and we had a really good chuckle going through the IRs because they're basically a circle. You can get an exemption for this unless you don't qualify for the exemption, and then you don't qualify for the exemption that you're asking for an exemption for.
That's almost as good as one that I learned when I was a young drafter, and it was a note to put on the drawings: verify all verifications with verifier. That was actually a note that somebody was putting on there. Those are really good points.
So the CGS linkage can cause your project to 12 months, as it did mine. We have a $38.5 million project to replace all of the utilities. One of the things that took us by surprise halfway through the planning process, we're bringing everything to DSA, getting it stamped out, and suddenly a utility shed becomes critical facilities. What determines, how do you present that information as DSA to us customers? How do you present that early on that there are certain things that no matter what you do, no matter how small they are going to require a $250,000 report that has to go to CGS, where CGS has a 3-month backlog, and you have no remedy for that. No matter who you try and call at CGS, it's still 3 months.
Okay, so one of the things that we need to do is better link our issues with CGS. Dan, do you want to add something to that? And I want to respond to another part of it.
Yeah, you mentioned the IRs. We do have an IR A-4 on when geotechnical or geohazard reports are required that to be reviewed and approved by CGS. The IRs are living documents, and they get updated periodically. So if there's confusion, I would let, for this particular one, Jim Hackett know. Jim is over the structural code and policy group in headquarters, and if there's unique circumstances we're not covering, hopefully we can clarify the language for the next time when people have to go through it.
Jim's team is in the process of trying to go back through all of the IRs and upgrade them. We are understaffed in that area. That's not an excuse, it's just a reality. But you're right, we've got some IRs that aren't working. We need to fix them. No question about that. There was another part to your question.
Yeah, critical facilities. What determines what is a critical facility that is necessarily going to require a Note 48 from CGS?
I don't know. I think we'd have to discuss that. I have to look at the IR. We'd need to talk with Jim about that too. And that might be something that we just haven't had a conversation about to adequately define what critical facilities are. So that could potentially be the next version of the IR. So it's good you let us know if you're running into problems with these documents, any of our interpretation of regulations or other documents. Let us know what the problems are so we can try to address it in the next version.
Well, Jim, I'm sure wherever you are, you're taking note of this right now, and we need to kind of look at this one right away. Thank you for bringing it up, because obviously none of us like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still not hearing an answer regarding what defines critical
I
facilities.
can't give you that answer. Let's do that. No, I don't want you to be brushed off. I personally don't know, and we need to sit down and talk it through. Jim's the guy that I think.
Right. And I think we need to know your specific situation. I think you mentioned before you've got a lot of earthquake faults on your site, and so that can come into play. I think if you're dealing with the regional office staff, say a plan reviewer or a supervisor, you can always elevate the issue. So we have a formal code appeal process on our website that gets referred to as CAP for the acronym there, that you can do an appeal. So and the way that works, it would go to plan reviewer, if it's under plan review, and then to the supervisor, then the regional manager, and then the statewide team. For each of the disciplines, structural, fire, and access, we have a statewide team. And so this would be structural. It's the supervisors, structural supervisors from all 4 regional offices, plus headquarters policy staff, in this case Diane, is in charge of that team. So the supervisors discuss it statewide, and the statewide team comes up with a recommended answer. It's run by the regional manager. So there's ways to elevate things. So that's what I would do if you have unique situations that may not have come up before, and you don't believe the answer is correct. Elevate it. You can use the CAP process, or just talk to the supervisor and let them know you want to elevate the process.
But Dan, he's asking for another question there. Is there something that he would know in advance that these are critical buildings? I think that's a valid point, and I'm asking Jim Hackett to take a look at that and see whether we could create that kind of list. I'm not sure we can, but it's a valid point. I would like to know in advance, not have to wait. And I agree with you. We didn't do a very good job on that, so we need to do better.
If I can,
I really want to, Jim, let's do it privately, only because I've got about 5 or 8 minutes and I'm still on question number 1. So I want to move to question number 2 at this point. It's really construction administration, the construction oversight process. What's the big hang-up that you guys are having? I know our hang-ups, but what's your big hang-up, your big problem in relationship to construction oversight? And is there somebody that wants to volunteer before I start forcing you? Okay, Tim, how about your table? Okay, go ahead. Somebody back there?
I run a testing lab, and one of the things that we see on a fairly regular basis is getting responses from RFIs and CCDs, and when something is an RFI that the structural engineer can say is okay, and when something needs to be DSA reviewed, as my inspectors find things that deviate from the plans and the specifications. And getting a response back from that can sometimes take time.
Response from who?
Well, that's the question, is who gives the response?
Well, the architect is responsible for the architect or a structural engineer, but normally through the architect, is responsible for solving those particular issues. That is who is responsible for it.
Right.
The field engineer is kind of the manager to make sure that, in fact, the inspector and everybody's doing their job out there. So I'm not quite sure whether is it hung up in the architect's office? Is it hung up at DSA in terms of the approval process? What do you say?
I think the answer to your question is yes. From our perspective, we find an issue and we send it off to the project inspector, and then it goes there through the whole design team, and then an unidentified someone makes the decision of whether it needs to be just a detail that's stamped by the structural engineer, or if it's something that needs to be reviewed by DSA and go through the formal process. Dan, you probably have seen this a fair amount, I would imagine.
Right. So in general, any structural fire access change needs to be reviewed and approved by DSA, whether it's before construction or during construction. So I think your example was a structural issue, right? So then that would need DSA review and approval. There's for CCDs, there's type A CCDs that are defined as needing DSA structural review and approval, and type B, where the architect determines they don't need DSA approval because they don't involve a change to structural fire access. And so when our field engineers visit periodically at the site, they'll ask the project inspector, okay, show me your list of all the changes, RFIs, ASIs, those kind of things. And they'll go through them, and it could be the architect or has determined they don't think it needs to go to DSA, but our field engineer will say, well, yeah, this one and this one need to go to DSA because we believe it's a structural fire access change. So that we'll look at that in the field, but if it's a structural change, it should go to DSA.
Yeah, and from our perspective, it kind of comes into, and we're trying to close out the jobs, and we're asked to put together our final verified reports, and there might or might not be a response. I'll have a report that says, hey, I sent this RFI off to get it clarified, and I haven't heard back that it's been approved or not.
Send it to DSA or to the architect?
It goes to from us, we don't send it directly to DSA. It goes to the design team, and then the project inspector's aware of it, and between them, they get it to DSA, is my understanding of
Well, it goes in the box. Let's be clear here. It goes into box, because that's our transmission piece, which everybody on the team has access to. So it's gone into the box, and if you're not getting a response, you need to jump in there and send the memo out and say, what's going on this?
Right.
I sent it on such and such date.
Right. And
well, we post discrepancy reports, a testing report that failed, basically. Because we have, there's conforming, there's non-conforming test reports, and then we don't always hear back from the people who make the decision of how to fix that.
Okay. So this is one of the reasons the inspection card process was set up too. So in the lab, you guys have to sign off on the inspection card, as does the, the inspector, special inspectors and the architect, all the design professionals. So if there's an issue that's deficient and you're not getting a response, then you shouldn't be signing off on the card, and the inspector shouldn't be signing off on that part of the card. And then it comes to everybody's attention, there's a problem here, people can't sign off, and the work maybe gets stopped for that portion until it gets fixed, and then that gets things going. So we don't want projects to proceed in construction where things get covered up that need to be fixed. So, I mean, that's part of the inspection card process.
The tendency is for these things to lie unknown in the weeds until the time comes to put the final verified reports together. And then everyone's kind of scrambling to take care of the documentation of it.
Well, if it's a structural change that
Anyway, that's probably
that's being covered up, I mean, it shouldn't be covered up until the change document gets approved.
Okay, and I think my point is we need to have a little education, maybe a little consistency in dealing with that amongst the field engineers and amongst the project inspectors, and then amongst the design team too. I mean, you're right, absolutely right, Chet. We're all involved in it.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about, I can only control, not can't control, but I can only have an impact internally, and that's why I'm trying to figure out where it is. Dan, maybe we ought to have a discussion at some point, or the regional managers, a discussion on where are we missing the boat there, and what can we do to make it work a little bit better. We're running out of some time, and I do have one question that I want to bring up in here and see where your comments are, and it's really question number 3. Let me give you a little bit of background piece to this. Right now, it is specifically stated in statute that DSA is responsible for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And that has been backed up by letters from a couple attorney generals that we should be doing this. For whatever reason, we've not been doing this. And I'm not necessarily looking to do mechanical or HVAC plan review. What I am concerned about, and what we're concerned about, is the sustainability issue, is the energy conservation, et cetera, is not just about a mechanical system. It's about the skin of the building. It's about all of those elements that make a building work from a standpoint of energy consumption and, of course, water consumption. So the question really is, what's your opinion of DSA providing some sort, undefined, some sort of review of the sustainability, which really is MEPE, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and energy process? And I want to throw it out there, and I know that there's some negatives, and that's okay. I want to hear about them, and I'd like to hear about those that might be positive. Anybody want to volunteer at this point? Yeah.
I would just, the first question obviously is how long would it take and how much will it cost the district to have you add that to your arsenal? Two questions you may not have.
We're at question above that,
Yeah.
which is, should we be doing it? But you're absolutely right. Those are subsets. We do not want to do anything that's going to slow down the process. The dollar amount is peanuts compared to the cost of the job. So I'm not terribly concerned about that, because I don't think we're not talking about huge fees, et cetera. I think we're really more concerned about the timing, and we're concerned about the process. We should not be designing an HVAC system. But what we should be doing is looking at what's the basis for design that says that this is going to have an EUI of, pick your number, 30. 32. How did they get to that number? Was it just arbitrary, or did they actually run the calcs? So if in fact you were to turn in our basis of design is X, Y, and Z, and all we're doing is checking to see whether the design that you've created really meets that piece, that might be the limitation of what we would do. And say, yes, based upon our modeling, they're correct. But
so you're proposing to check like the energy models to make sure that what we already have on the drawings as far as all the energy forms
meets your basis of design. I'm not proposing anything right now. I'm really discussing it. You know, is this something appropriate? When should we do it? Should we do it at all? But with the state, hold on, folks. Okay, you want to say no, that's fine.
I think
that's fine, but I've got a boss, at least my boss right now, his name is Jerry Brown. And he's very concerned because we are a state that is leading on the on the edge of trying to be sustainable. So the question is whether we should do it. Don't give me good reasons. I understand why people are going to say no, but I want to hear the reasoning behind it. So continue.
I think from my perspective, there's things that you rely on the licensed professionals to do that, you know, you obviously are checking fire access and structure because those are the life safety critical things. Energy, and I would argue mechanical, plumbing, not necessarily a life safety issue. So for that reason, I think you can rely on us design professionals to do that part correctly under our licenses and not have to worry about it.
So your argument is self-certification on those items. That's fair. That's a fair thing. Anybody have a different viewpoint from that particular one? Even if it's a no viewpoint?
It's a no viewpoint, but with a different thing. Recently, I helped district hire its commissioning consultant, and I confess I hadn't gotten into the weeds before on that subject, but now that for our substantial projects, commissioning direct to the district is required. I found a lot of the things that I think the governor and you are concerned about are in fact being checked by those who are doing commissioning, and of course they have to have the right licenses and so forth and so on.
Well, Dick, if I understand the law correctly, and I could be wrong on this, it's any building over 10,000 square feet that triggers it. Am I correct?
So there's a commissioning light that can be done by the mechanical engineer of record that is required, and then you're right, over a certain size, independent of the mechanical engineer of record.
So let me ask the question, and if you can be honest with this, I would appreciate it. I'm not going to look at anybody's names or faces. How many of you folks are actually doing that commissioning on buildings over 10,000 feet? How many are you actually doing it? Versus, and if you'll be honest, those that are not, if you will tell me how many are not doing it. But let's start with those that are doing it. Can you raise your hands, please? Because that's a good argument. That's a great argument if you're commissioning. Okay. How many are not doing it? Anybody want to tell me, is this the truth? Okay. I get a little bit nervous when I see that, but because that to me is probably one of the stronger arguments. If you're commissioning, then you're doing it. Then you're doing exactly what we're talking about. We have a conflict because statute says we're supposed to do it. So we might have to go, if in fact commissioning is going to get stronger, we might have to go in and go to and to eliminate or change our law as long as the commissioning is going forth. So that's a good argument. I actually appreciate that, Dick. That's really strong. Just a straight out, flat out no doesn't work for me. Yeah.
And from my understanding, commissioning is supposed to start at the design level. So if
Right.
we're starting the commissioning when we're supposed to be, which is at the design level, then we're already being checked for it and carrying it all the way through the construction period for the commissioning at the end to make sure that it was built in conformity with it. Then to have DSA go over it again basically is double checking everything, and the district's paying more money to do it again.
Well, I would agree with you. I'm just trying to confirm whether in fact commissioning is being done, and we'll have to do that some other way, is really being done on our buildings. If they are, that's the best argument that we've got, because we're doing it right. And are we moving and doing the work after occupancy, because that's part of commissioning, and that's a place that I don't believe that we're actually monitoring at the end. I don't think we are on a lot of commissioned buildings. But you've given me your answers, and I really appreciate